So I want to thank you for joining us this evening. My name is Chris Monroe, and it is my pleasure and honor to serve as superintendent of Santa Cruz City Schools. Gracias por venir esta noche para la webinar de budget. Necesito ayuda de Cindy para traducir. So welcome again this evening. Cindy's going to translate for us. Cindy, do you want to explain how to do the translation if you need it?
Si necesitan el traducir, van a hacer clic en el icon de globo que está abajo que dice interpretación y van a escoger la idioma de español.
We're going to get that set up. Here we go. We are recording this webinar tonight, and we're going to be able to share this information with anyone who may not have been able to join us for the webinar, but they'll be able to access the information on our webpage. And I want to introduce Sam Rollins, who's going to walk us through this budget presentation tonight.
Thanks, Chris. Thank you, everyone, for joining us. I know it's not always easy to make time on a weeknight, and so we are recording this so hi to anyone who's watching this after the fact as well. I'm going to start the slideshow. Okay. So what we're going to go over here today is our funding sources, California school funding, where our state and federal resources come from, what our local resources look like, how bonds fit into everything. And then we're going to talk about some variables that all school districts are dealing with right now that impact the budget that we try to set for this year and for years in the future, which we sort of have to do on a regular basis, budget out years in the future. And we do this every couple of years. We try to make this information available to people because we want the public to have a good understanding of how our budgets are put together, where our money comes from, and where it goes. But this is an especially important time for us to make this information available because we've finally seen the end of the additional COVID resources that we had for about 4 years after coming back from lockdown. And because that money has sunsetted or is sunsetting, there will be some reduction of services. And so we want, because there have been additional services added over that time, and so we want as much input as we can get from our families, from our staff, and from our students about what is most important. Your priorities really have to guide where we go from here at all times for school districts. So at the end of this presentation, we will let you know how you can weigh in with specific priorities. But it is also part of the annual family survey that we that we send out. That's actually active on our website right now. So if you go to the district website, you will see the annual family survey. So in California, there's two ways that school districts can be funded. Revenue limit districts are funded by average daily attendance, and basic aid districts are directly funded by the property taxes in their local area. And basically, if your local property taxes would deliver significantly more funding than the revenue limit model, then you are put into what's called basic aid, which just means that you're a district that's funded by your local property taxes, and your funding doesn't go up or down depending on how many students you have that you are serving. We've linked here an opportunity for further reading. It's pretty complicated why school districts are funded the way that they are and what that history looks like. But anyone who's interested can look up the real story of school funding, and we will be sharing these slides out as well. So you'll be able to click that. So, what makes Santa Cruz City Schools so interesting is that we are both. We actually operate as two districts under one board and administration. We have our elementary school district and our secondary school district that covers middle and high schools. And we're in a very strange position where our elementary district is basic aid because of how essentially relatively high property taxes are in the city of Santa Cruz. But our secondary district, which covers a much wider area of the North County of Santa Cruz County, is a revenue limit district. So the state of California has two different ways of calculating the revenue that we get for TK through fifth grade and sixth through 12th grade. And that is our combined funding in Santa Cruz. And an easy way to understand revenue limit versus basic aid is essentially that the state of California thinks that no one should have any less funding per student than this mostly full glass on the left. But if your property taxes take you so much further past that line that your cup overflows, you get to keep a lot of that overflow to fund your schools with. So, we're in an interesting position in that regard, and when I'll tell you why that's important in a couple minutes. So, our budget for this school year, we believe, is about $115 million. And the reason I say we believe is simply that our budget is not that fixed at any given time. We report who is in our district to the state, and then they provide an estimate of how much they think it will cost to serve those students. And we actually go back and forth a few times a year where we update our numbers and they update their numbers. And the only time we really know how much we spent in a school year is after the fact, when everything has been accounted for. And then the school tells us how much, we received during that year. So it's a bit complicated, but this year we're likely to spend about $115 million. Now, this is a breakdown of where that money is spent. And as you can see, the vast majority is in staff, teachers, and support staff, and then benefits for our teachers and support staff. Books and supplies is relatively small. It's not only books, it's pretty much all the supplies that we purchase and pay for to run schools. And then services is primarily utilities, but there are also other expenses within that, but it's mostly power, water, etc. Yeah, and some slides have English and Spanish on them at once, and some don't. So I will be pausing periodically so that Cindy has a chance to explain on her end as well. So yeah, most of our funding goes to people, and the next biggest chunk is heating and light, essentially. But where does the money come from, right? If that's our spending, or if that's our revenue, what is our spending? Sorry. If that's our spending, what does our income look like? So as you can see here, the vast majority of our money comes from the state, but we do get federal funds and local funding as well, which are vital revenue sources for school districts. And I'll talk a little bit more about those in just a moment. And forgive me if I'm going quickly. When we present this at school sites, we try to get it in about 20 minutes so that PTOs and PTAs can have the rest of their meeting. But there's no need to rush exactly today. So most of the money that we get comes from the state of California. And most of the money that we get from the state comes in the form of what they call our LCFF base. don't worry about the acronym. LCFF stands for Local Control Funding Formula. This is what we call our general fund. This is money this is the only money really that we get that is unrestricted. And that just means that we can spend it however we see fit as long as we are paying for running our school district. So this is the money that's calculated primarily from attendance in the secondary and property taxes in the elementary. It accounts for most of our money. But in addition to our general fund, the state of California also provides us with a supplemental fund attached to it. So our supplemental LCFF funding is money that is generated by our numbers of English learner, low income, homeless, and foster youth, and is restricted. It can only be spent on services that support English learner, low income, homeless, and foster youth. Now, we call this number our unduplicated count because we can only count each student once, even if they exist in multiple categories. If we have a student who is a low-income homeless student, we only get to count them once. So that is the additional amount of money that we get for programming just to support those highest need students. We do also get a further chunk of state funding, all of which is restricted. And I'm not going to read through each of these now. Like I said, we are going to share these slides, or if it's recording, you can pause here and read them on your own. These are sort of small buckets of funding for specifically for very dedicated purposes that we get from the state of California. We can't spend them outside of the areas that they're earmarked for. I do like to call everyone's attention to the fourth down. That's the unrestricted amount of money that we get from the lottery. Because we like to bring that up because a lot of people, I think, have something of a misconception that the lottery funds a significant portion of schools. Now, this amount of money, as you see it in the circle, is very small. That's not to say that it's not incredibly useful and appreciated. It's just a relatively small portion of money. I'll give everyone a chance to read this too, and apologize to Cindy for moving fast. Oh, and I should have said at the start that if anyone has questions, you can enter that in the chat. And so you don't have to wait until I'm done to begin asking questions if you have them, and my colleagues will answer those as we go. So we do have one more source of revenue that is in some way tied to COVID funding. There is a state learning recovery emergency block grant. This amount of money here is to cover 3 more years so that we can be tapering down services that we added during COVID. So this is another chunk of money. But as you saw with our spending, if we spend about $110 to $115 million a year, something close to $4 million for 3 years doesn't give us a huge cushion, but we are grateful to have this this extra little bit of money to more gracefully eliminate the additional programming or services that we added during COVID. And in just a minute, I'll show you the full COVID resources that we were able to get and spend during those 4 years, for which this is just an addendum. So we also do get some federal funding. Now, during COVID, this was a much bigger slice of our total because a lot of our support funds came from the federal government. But right now, it's down to a modest size of our funding. Most of the money that we get from the federal government is restricted to higher needs students. As you can see, disabled students, high need students, There's a couple of different services for disabled students and English learner supports. And we'll talk a little bit more about federal funding sources in just a moment. So, like I said, we want to make sure that we're transparent and everyone has a strong understanding of how we spent COVID resources in, as I said, the 4 years coming out of lockdown. So it's worth pointing out that of this $23 million came in many, 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 many small grants that we were lucky enough to have the bandwidth in our finance department and in our district office in general to be able to go out for these grants, because in order to get any of this money, a school district had to write a detailed plan of how they were going to spend it and then begin reporting on it as well. So some smaller districts had trouble getting these grants even when the money was available. So we're very grateful that we were in a position to receive the funding. And this is a very complex slide. This is definitely a point to pause if you're watching this after the fact. But again, for everyone here, we will be sending these slides out. As you can see, a huge portion of the COVID funding that we spent was for materials and services. There were a lot of technology needs and even, practical in-room things that had to happen coming back from lockdown for us to meet all of the spacing and sanitation requirements during hybrid learning and masked learning. But we were able to make some real expansions to our support staff and our teaching staff to just give students a lot more hours with instructors. So most of these services have already been kind of tapered away over the past couple of years, but not all of them have. We still currently have a second RTI coordinator in elementary. An RTI coordinator is essentially a teacher support teacher who helps serve and support the entire campus and works with teachers to assess where students are and help design supports around them. But yeah, this is the sort of grand list. And if you have questions about this, let me know. I could have clicked over to Spanish earlier. Sorry, Cindy. But it's important that everyone understands that our state and federal funds do not have any dedicated funding for social emotional counselors, elementary art and music, career training programs, credentialed librarians, athletic programs, or if you're in our elementary, garden learning, our Life Lab programs. They also have no funding set aside for fields, gyms, pools, athletics facilities, or even infrastructure, plumbing, roofing, and wiring. Certainly not to build or rebuild any buildings or classrooms. And that is in large part, so in California and in many states, if not most states, these are thought of as local decisions left up to a community to decide whether or not they're going to fund these areas. So we're incredibly grateful to the greater community of Santa Cruz and the wider community to be able to have the support they've given us. So that first part of the list, libraries, art, music teachers, athletics programs, career education, anything that pays for staff, for teachers, and for time. That to get that funding, we have to go out for parcel taxes. And so we're very, very happy and grateful that and as I talk a little bit more, I'm going to switch this and I'll switch back. In 2020, our community voted overwhelmingly to make what was then a temporary parcel tax permanent, so that we could have continuing funding for our libraries, our elementary counselors, art music teachers, all of these things. they make such a huge difference in the lives of students and in the development of students and in the school experience. So we're incredibly grateful for the parcel taxes T and U. If you want to learn more about the parcel taxes, what they fund, um, or even some more of their history, you can find that on our website as well under the community tab. You can learn more about T and U. I still see Cindy talking, so I feel bad. Um, I don't. I need to get better at giving enough time. Um, but because we're going to be asking going forward for everyone's priorities and input on much of our spending, we do want everyone to know that the parcel taxes don't cover the whole of the costs of the programming that I mentioned. They cover most of it, but they do require contributions from our general fund to supplement the cost of those programs. So that is something to keep in mind when we ask for priorities. When we mention the additional funding to supplement our parcel tax programs, that's what we're talking about. It's the extra money that we have to pay to keep our athletic teams, CTE programs in the secondary, social emotional counselors, uh, libraries, art and music in elementary to keep those programs going. So our local revenue comes primarily from the parcel taxes T and U. The next item on this list is a special education MOU. We have a collaborative agreement with the school districts in the north of Santa Cruz County, where we pool the money that we get for special education, and Santa Cruz City Schools provides a lot of the services for students even outside of our district. And really what that comes down to is none of us are funded that much for special education, so this is a more efficient way that we can serve all of our students. I will talk a little bit more about special education in a minute because that is a big um, variable in our budget. We do receive some money from interest from renting and leasing facilities, but as you can see, the bulk of our local ongoing revenue comes from the parcel taxes T and U. And in fact, we essentially have to take the second line, the special education MOU, and then subtract our contribution to that MOU at the bottom. So yeah, so it doesn't net us very much income. It's not why we do it. So we also want everyone to understand that all school districts, don't get any funding to build anything, rebuild anything, or even repair anything on their campuses. So what most school districts do is every 10 years or so, they go out for a facilities bond. They ask their community, hey, there's a lot of wear and tear that schools go through. We need some more funding to fix roofs and pipes and that sort of thing. Well, due in large part to the recession of 2008-ish, we went almost 20 years in our area without going out for a bond, without asking the community for a bond. So in 2016, when we went out for a bond, there was some dire need in a lot of the infrastructure and facilities around Santa Cruz. So we went out in 2016. When we spoke to the public, we let everyone know that it's likely we were going to go out again for a bond before 10 years were up. And we did again in 2022 with K and L. And that money has transformed our schools in so many ways and in a lot of invisible ways because we had a lot of water, electrical infrastructure that had aged out and we just have a much, much stronger foundation to run our schools on now. But I'll get to more of the accomplishments in a minute. Specifically, K and L that passed in 2022 were passed primarily to modernize and continue to modernize our school sites, but they also had language to expand our solar footprint to make our schools more energy sustainable, and to build an educator housing development on land that the district already owned on the west side of Santa Cruz. So, with these bonds, we've been able to refresh and refurbish a lot of aging buildings. We've remodeled gyms. We've built, I'll say I played on the Harbor Field when it was basically a puddle of mud 20 years ago. And now they've got, a wonderful stadium. Um, the new pool at Soquel, new buildings in so many of our elementary schools. And I will say a lot of the new buildings replaced portables, and portable buildings are used by every school district that I've ever encountered, but they do age very quickly and they have pretty hard age limits. So our ability to build permanent buildings to replace portables is incredibly important, because portables, when they reach the end of their life cycle, they really start deteriorating quickly. So at Galt, Bayview, and De La Viega, and at Branch 40 Small Schools, in many other places, it's been so wonderful to be able to build real classrooms rather than portables that we all but rent um, with time limits. An other thing that we're very excited about with that bond, a smaller portion of the funding from the bond will help to fund our educator housing development, which is on the west side between Gateway School and like Cafe Eveta, right by Derby Park. There's a piece of land that the district owns. And on that site, we're building 100 units of housing that will be available for district employees. We have had, I think it's close to 200 employees over the last 10 years, um, or teachers over the last 10 years leave solely due to the cost of living in Santa Cruz. 3 years in a row, we're the most expensive place to rent housing in the United States. And so this is an increasingly viable option for districts all over the state to build housing that allows us to offer subsidized rents to teachers and support staff so that they can make it work living in Santa Cruz without having to move to a cheaper area after a few years of teaching. And we're really excited that we have all of our approvals from the city. We're just finalizing our construction permits so that we can break ground. The plan is this winter. And that too, you can find more information on our website. So we talked a lot about all the different spending categories that we have, restricted and unrestricted. We also do want to let everyone know that there is a small allocation that each school site gets, essentially discretionary funds. This can pay for extra hours for some of the staff if they have special projects that are happening at their school, buy books, supplies. In the elementary, sometimes this money goes to things like assemblies or field trips. But it's at the discretion of that school site, how they spend this small amount of money. Okay, so a little bit of review. These are our funding sources that I've marked, whether they're restricted or unrestricted. Most of our money comes from what we call our general fund, which is that money that is calculated based on property taxes in the elementary and average daily attendance in the secondary. We have supplemental funding to support higher needs students. We have what are all of those sort of small categories from our federal and state funding that are restricted, we call categoricals. We also do have a staff grant writer who brings $2 to $3 million a year in to the school district, and that is wonderful because it's a significant portion of funding that can fund some wonderful things in the district. It just needs to be said that every one of those grants, again, can only be spent in very specific ways based on the language of the grant. That's also true of our parcel tax, local revenue, and the bonds that we get. Bond funding can tend to look like a lot of money. You know, if a school goes out for a 200 million or $350 million bond, it can only be spent on facilities. So it can essentially only be built to build and repair. It can't be used to hire a teacher or anything like that. And all I'll say is you will be astounded at the cost of construction at this point in time. So it looks like a lot, but the work is expensive. And then we went over our COVID resources as well, which have essentially covered the last 4 years. And I'll give everyone else a chance to read through this too for a minute. So we're also facing a lot more uncertainty than we're used to. And public school districts are used to a lot of uncertainty in our funding year over year. But with the shutdown and other federal policies, we're facing more than we have grown accustomed to in recent years. So, Chris, do you want me to hand things over to you to discuss this?
Sure. Um, so I think that's where we're living right now with a lot of uncertainty. In the fall, when we first started doing these family budget workshops, school budget workshops, there were three proposals for education. One that rested with the president's office, and that saw significant cuts to the education department, many of which we've seen. And but not specifically addressing budget. All of our professional development money, all those dollars that support us in helping our teachers to grow and improve their practice rests with the federal government. And that's one of the things that is proposed for being eliminated, as well as programs for immigrant students, and the president's proposed to keep our Title I funding level. We receive dollars for Title I dollars again are for our students who are living in poverty, and our special education dollars level. The House of Representatives proposed even deeper cuts than the president, including a 27% cut to Title I, which would have a significant impact for our district. I'm hoping that it's going to land somewhere more with a bipartisan Senate proposal that proposes a slight increase to Title I and preserves some of the other federal programs, but still cuts professional development and some other federally funded programs. So what I can say right now is we don't know a lot. We don't know a lot about what federal funding is going to look like for the next school year. We are putting in contingency plans in place if we were to lose all of our federal funding. I don't expect that we'll lose special education funding. They don't fully fund special ed as it is. But I don't think I think it's unlikely we'd lose all of Title I or all of special ed. We may see reductions. Next slide, Sam. Sam, do you want to do the key variables, or do you want me to? I'm happy to do them both.
Oh yeah, I'm happy to. Yeah, in the 1970s, I believe it was, the federal government made it a requirement for school districts to serve all the needs of special education students, which is wonderful. It's absolutely the right thing to do. But at that point in the late 1970s, they said, give us a couple years, few years, and the federal government will fund these programs. And that has never come to pass. So we spend so much more than we receive in special education funding that 28% of our general fund has to go to cover the extra costs of special education. And these costs have gone up for a number of different reasons. One of which is that we've gotten a lot better, schools and parents, at identifying students who have specific needs. But one of the other major reasons for cost escalation is that if a student has such severe needs or disabilities that they can't really thrive, that there's no feasible way for them to exist in a regular school setting, they need essentially residential care. Some people have needs so high that they require that. And schools are the entity that funds that. But there aren't very many facilities in California that cater to people with high needs like that in a school environment. So most of our relationships for that kind of placement are with organizations in Utah. And the cost of providing that round-the-clock service to high needs people has escalated considerably over the past few years, as have the costs even of dedicated aides. And we work with organizations that provide skilled aides that deal with special education students with very high needs. The cost of those programs have gone up considerably as well. This is the shorter version of this presentation. We do have a longer version that shows the cost escalation over the past 7 years or so of special education. But we always like to bring that up because if anyone is inclined to have discussions with their local representatives about ways that they can help schools, funding special education is probably the single most impactful thing that any governmental organization, state or federal, could do to bring a huge amount of support to schools. So we have to anticipate that those costs will continue to go up, which means we have to budget more money for special education each year. Sadly, we know that health insurance costs have been going up considerably for everyone. It's certainly true of the options available for us in getting coverage for our employee base. On average, our health insurance costs go up 12% every year. And that's even with shopping around, for lack of a better term, and seeking out what the most affordable deals and plans are. Likewise, the cost of utilities goes up significantly. I'm going to just click over here for a second, and then I'm going to keep going. And that's really important because that's another cost that we just have to budget as growing faster than we get any kind of increase in money to pay for it. So we've had 100% increase in the last decade of the cost of power. Luckily, we have a community that supported us in putting up a lot of solar panels. So our costs aren't going up nearly as steeply as some other entities and some other school districts. We have our first net zero campus in Bayview, and our second net zero campus is at Harbor High, I believe, in the next year or two. So we're really glad that we're able to do something to mitigate that escalated cost, but the cost is still going up. As I said, the end of COVID resources is difficult because there's a lot of services that are vital or that we saw have very high impact coming out of COVID, but we are no longer getting funding to maintain all those services. We also have actually in Santa Cruz fewer low-income and English learner and foster youth every year, and that means less supplemental money coming in. And we have this kind of interesting problem where we are seeing a very slight decline in enrollment in our secondary. And that essentially, years ago, we saw a decline in enrollment in elementary. And that dip has made it all the way to our middle and high schools where we are funded based on how many students we have coming to school every day. We also have a bit of a boom at the bottom of our system in TK and Kinder. It's great news that more students are coming into the school district. But if you remember, we don't get any extra funding for more students in the early grades, even if we have to hire more teachers. In fact, if we have to hire more teachers in the elementary and we have less revenue coming in the secondary, that puts a big squeeze on the district. And then the other variable that we wanted to talk about is from Senate Bill 218. This is a delicate matter. It is a very well-intentioned bill that essentially removed the statute of limitations for any childhood abuse case in the state of California. But what that means is if there was any sort of abuse that was associated with a school or a school district from the relatively, the distant past, anyone can attempt to collect civil penalties for that. But what's been happening is if someone wants to sue a perpetrator, they usually look and sort of realize that perpetrator doesn't have assets, and so they sue in the school that they were associated with. So this incredibly well-meaning bill that is helping people find justice is bankrupting school districts all over California. Because if someone from the, say, 70s or 80s has a complaint that they put forward, it's all but impossible to find any kind of records of that time to determine who, if anyone, at the school district was, at fault. So that has put a significant budget crunch on school districts because no one really knows when something could come up. And our district did have a case from the late 80s, I believe it was. And there are little to no records of that time. So the school district is not really able to determine who their insurer was to help pay for any kind of damages. And all the people who had responsibility at that time are deceased or in their late 80s. So it's incredibly difficult to engage with a case like that. And like I said, there are school districts all over California who are going bankrupt. Now, we're talking with, and lots of school districts are talking with the state government to look for ways to still allow people to pursue justice from anything that happened to them in their childhood in a way that wouldn't force today's families and taxpayers to be dramatically impacted by any of that fallout. So that's a very complicated thing. Feel free to ask questions about it. But because, as I said, a number of school districts have gone bankrupt up and down California, this is another area where all school districts are having to put thought into their budget going forward to determine whether any money can be put aside against the possibility. I know that's very complex, and I'm sorry, Cindy, for not switching over soon. So, given that there are this many, variables that we're facing in the near future, there are lots of ways that we take in input from everyone involved in schools, because what we want is to have the best understanding of everybody's perspective and priorities as we're deciding, making decisions in our budget and in our programming, so that we have services that reflect the needs of our of the people that we serve. So we do send out our annual survey to students, staff, and family. Again, if you go to our district website, sccs.net, that should be front and center. And we very much encourage you and your students to fill it out. A version was sent to students for them to fill out. We have staff meetings every week where staff can provide this input. We have a budget advisory committee and a district advisory committee where neighbors and parents and citizens can provide their input there. We do ask for input at our English Learner Advisory Committee, our district-wide English Learner Advisory Committee. We have a parent leader dinner that we hold a number of times a year where we ask for input from parent leaders across the district. We also discuss these issues at the Superintendent's Student Advisory Committee and at our high school student focus groups at the high school campuses. And this is all to say that we're always looking for input. This meeting right here and or the link that you see below this recorded webinar is just another way that we're looking to get direct input from our families. So, and let me check and see. I think that this link should be up on our district website. If not, I will put it in the chat as well so that everyone has access to it. But we essentially are asking everyone to give us their top 3 priorities from this list of supports. And I know that it sounds intimidating to try to, pick 3 things that have been the most impactful when likely all of these things have been impactful to you as parents or to your students. Really, we just want to understand what is of highest importance to as many people as we can talk to. So don't feel like you have to think about the big picture of how the district is running. We're really just asking what has been most impactful to you. And then, sorry, I'm looking. Okay, yeah. So if you go to our district website, you will see the, in our news section, you'll see the Budget 101, which is this presentation. And if you click on that, there is a link to the survey that allows you to indicate your priorities. So what are the specific supports that we're talking about? We've broken them into categories to
Sam,
hopefully.
can I add too, if
Yeah.
you're struggling with getting to the accessing that link, that survey that Sam has sent out multiple times, it should be in your email, it should be in your text. Also will allow you to do the same thing.
Oh yeah, good point. The annual family survey has this in it as well. So the categories that we've broken these supports down into are academic support during the day, academic support outside the school day, like after school programming and summer school, behavior intervention services, PBIS is a big part of elementary, but the programs exist in secondary as well. Our classroom support staff, our augmentation to parcel taxes. If you remember, that is the extra money that has to come out of our general fund to pay for the list that you see there: art, music in elementary, career training in secondary, and so much more. Our mental health support programs, that's our social emotional counselors or our counselors in the elementary and all the other services associated with those. Our family engagement professionals are the community coordinators at your school sites. Professional development, that's a priority that we usually staff indicate more than families, but we just want our families to know how incredibly valuable that is. Giving teachers professional development is incredibly important because as a teacher, you can get pretty siloed. And when we're able to have dedicated time for them to collaborate and learn together, it goes a long way in really building their skills and strengths as teachers. We also have, we've set aside co-curricular programs, which are enrichments covering everything from athletics, theater, mock trial, and then central office supports. Now, again, we don't necessarily expect families to indicate this as a high priority. This is here for staff as well. The HR department is not, going to be the favorite thing about the school district for families, but I assure you we could not run a school district without it or the other supports from the district office. So that is the kind of the main top-down list that we're asking people to look at and select from it your top 3 priorities, the 3 things that have been most impactful for you as a parent. And yeah, as Chris points out, we do have this direct survey on our district website. But if you click on the annual family survey, which I strongly suggest that everyone does, then you will be able to give this same input on that survey as well. Or if you have your phone handy while you're on a computer webinar, you can always click the QR code. All right, and with that, I'm going to stop the screen share, seeing as how we've finished the presentation.
There's some questions there that one I meant to answer typing, but I couldn't because I pushed the wrong button. So I just want to share that there are about 9 people on this webinar. We have done these presentations at every school site, and we've had a group of families come to each of our presentations. And we will monitor how much we look at how many times any one of our postings, our webinar postings are watched or downloaded from the website. So we have a sense of how far the word is being spread. There's also some questions about the being 2 districts. So there's about 4 districts in the state who are 2 districts under one board and administration. They're called common administration districts. We do we keep our budget is one budget, but we do 2 reports to the state and to the federal government for for each of our districts. Except for the LCAP, the Local Control Accountability Plan, there's one for both districts under as it's supervised under one board administration. I hope that answers that question. The Modesto City, Santa Rosa City, Santa Cruz City, there's these city school districts that were set up this way in the state a long time ago. And it made sense for us to be 2 separate districts because even before the elementary district was basic aid, that are community funded, it allowed us to bring in more revenue to have the 2 districts separated because a high school district gets a higher revenue limit than an elementary district does, or a unified district. And ask if a report comes back to the community from the survey. It is the LCAP. So the LCAP, the Local Control Accountability Plan, ends up being published and is on our website every May. We also have a district advisory committee and other family groups that provide direct input to that and shape that LCAP as it's built over the course of the spring semester. There are other questions that we could answer for you. And please remember, we're always here to answer questions. So if you don't have them now, but you have questions later, we're here to answer them. I answered some earlier questions about legislative advocacy and how do we, that during the COVID years, for the first time, I felt like we had somewhat adequate funding. And I've been the superintendent in Santa Cruz City Schools for 12 years, and I've been in education for 33. Public education is really good at doing a lot with not enough. And our teachers, you hear about it, our teachers spend money on their own classrooms, and I work really hard to make sure they don't have to do that, but it's tough. They want to give more to students than our budget allows. I wish we could. I'm so excited we're able to build housing to help our young teachers stay in the district and our support staff to stay in the district. We do a great job of training young people and then lose them to the cost of living. Um, but we can, I can't just raise salaries. We have we don't have as much money as I wish we had so that we could give the salaries I'd like us to be able to give to help people stay and live in this community where it's really expensive and difficult. We're hoping the housing project will help with that. There's a call to rally the public to change the way our public schools are funded. I'm all in. Um,
Well, there's a good point raised by, yeah, actually, we should work this into the funding presentation going forward. There is new policy in the state of California that actually requires insurers to help to contribute money to fund the mental health programs that are run at schools, which is really great because a lot of these programs aren't really funded directly by any other means. But it requires, for us to receive funding from insurers, we need our families to provide consent and share their insurance information with us. Now, by law, insurers are not allowed to charge families anything for the contributions they make to school districts. So that's another huge way that you could support your schools. On our school website, or if you look through your email, you'll see emails from me asking you to fill it out. If you fill out a short form that just gives us permission to contact your insurance company will help fund the mental health counseling at your school, which is really wonderful.
and this is new. When all of the COVID resources sunset, the state knew that if we were going to keep mental health services in schools, there needed to be another funding source. Um, so we're super grateful to have this possibility, and it is going to help us keep mental health resources on campus.
And thank you, Shelley, for mentioning.
In terms of, again, lobbying local legislators, parent groups at schools could do it, parents as individuals can do it. We work really hard with our professional organizations, the California School Boards Association, the Association of California School Administrators. We work in partnership with the American Federation of Teachers, our bargaining units, our teachers' unions to advocate for the needs of students and to advocate for adequate school funding. There's information on websites for all of those organizations for doing that, or if you have specific questions, please don't hesitate to reach out to us. Are there any other questions this evening? I really want to thank everyone for joining us. I know that budget isn't necessarily the most exciting topic, but it's important, and understanding how we're funded and the resources we have, and understanding too that your voice is really important and the voice of families. We use that annual family survey along with the other surveys that we do of staff and students to do our budget development every year. And whether there's lots of resources or not enough resources, that information really helps us determine the priorities for the school districts, along with student outcome data but it's amazing every year how aligned families, staff, and students are and what their top priorities are. So we appreciate you taking the time to be here. We appreciate you giving us your feedback because we use it. With that, we'll go ahead and close this evening. Have a great evening, and thank you again for joining us. Good
Thanks,
night.
everybody.